Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pull Focus, the cinema-based entertainment podcast where a couple of freelancers come together to talk shop. My name is Mike, and as always, I'm joined by my brother in crime, a man who has his share of friends and enemies, a man who is known to sing a limerick or two. He knows the difference between a lock and a lach. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Andrus.
I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say a few things about this wee little Mike Juarez that we have going for us.
Wee and little. Whoa, hold on, man. Hold on. What?
Sorry, the gigantic man that you are.
Thank you.
Your enormous talent and presence.
It's not. They don't see our faces on the YouTube videos, man. You gotta feed into the imagination of these people, dude. Come on.
Well, if I were to compare you to any other actor in this film, it would have to be Collin Farrell.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
There you are.
The eyebrow game is strong, and that's a lovely accent.
The eyebrow game is intense.
It is intense on this one, dude. I am very, very happy to see it. I applaud it. In case you guys aren't wondering why, the title or whatever, we are going to talk about an interesting piece in this episode. One that's been given some Oscar nods and has been provided with some good feedback, some bad feedback. But the bottom line is that's interesting, and we watched it so that you can hear about it. We are going to go to the lovely Isles of Ireland, and we are going to talk about the Banshees of Inisherin.
Call him Sonny Larry. Didn't you and he used to be the best of friends?
We're still the best of friends.
No, you're not.
Who says we're not?
Sit somewhere else.
Now, if I've done something to you, just tell me what I've done to you.
Well, you didn't do anything to me. I just don't like you no more.
You didn't like me yesterday.
Why does he not want to be friends with you no more? Why is he 12?
What the hell's going on with you, me feckin' brother?
He's dull, Siobhan.
But he's always been done.
The other night, 2 hours you spent talking to me about the things you found in your little donkey shite that day.
Well, it wasn't me little donkey's shite. It was me pony's shite, which shows how much you were listening.
If you don't stop talking to me...
Colin!
And if you don't stop bothering me, I have a set of shears at home, and each time you bother me from this day on, I'll take those shears and I'll take one of my fingers off with them, and I'll give that finger to you until I have no fingers left. Does this make things clearer to you?
Not really, no.
Starting from now. But shush like, Polly. You know, shush like.
Yeah, I'd shush like. Would you not want him to have to do the one finger to see if he was bluffing, like?
No, we wouldn't.
Because worse comes to worse, he can still play the fiddle with 4 fingers, I bet ya.
Going back to your own gang now, Polly.
And talking to me! Are you?
Why aren't you talking to Porrick no more?
That wouldn't be a sin now, would it, Father?
No, but it's not very nice either, is it?
Do you know who we remember for how nice they was in the 17th century?
Who?
Absolutely no one. Yet we all remember the music of the time. Everyone to a man knows Mozart's name.
I don't, so there goes that theory.
Can't be waiting around for any more of this madness.
Let's just call it quits.
We won't call it quits. We'll call it the start.
And that was a trailer for the Banshees of Inisherin. Andrus, this is man, I really did enjoy some of the things about this movie, but I got to tell you, really, from the get-go, this movie kind of affected me in ways that I didn't think it was going to. We're going to be talking about the dynamic duo of, the dynamic trio, if you're talking about the director too, of Martin McDonagh, Collin Farrell, and Brendan Gleeson, with a great supporting cast, but a story that kind of wraps itself around the faltering death of what was once a lovely friendship. Hopefully art will not imitate life, because whenever these three get together, I always seem to enjoy it. They have a history with like In Bruges and some other titles that are popping up in regards to this team popping around. And also with the Oscar nods, it is very possible that we will see these three creators, and also hopefully other creators, including the ridiculously Carrie Condon, the ridiculously talented Barry Coogan, and just another just some heavy hitters when it comes to the supporting cast with Pat Short, Aaron Monahan, Gary Lydon, that kind of stuff. But before we jump in to this historical comedy drama, I gotta double check on a couple things and make sure that the Luckily Irish is with us when I ask, how are you doing? How are you? How's everything been?
Well, how am I doing?
Yeah.
That's what that you're asking me.
You're gonna be using the accent the entire episode.
Right here. I might be quite obnoxious throughout.
No, it's great. It's great. You have a great Irish accent.
No, I'm doing great. This one was an interesting, fun one for me to review because I do really appreciate my my Irish accent heritage.
100%. You and me both.
This duo ever since In Bruges, like you said, it's
blowing me away.
So definitely a little bit of a highlight of my week in watching this one, reviewing this one. Other than that, it's been kind of just a chill week.
Sweet.
So that's been good.
Bring that on, right? I mean, like things.
Bring
on more chill weeks. We don't really, like, I keep mentioning this because it's a habit of mine, but like we don't really record these in order. We make our plans, we watch a movie, and then we get it in the can and bring it out whenever time allows and that kind of thing. But it has been 2023 is up and at 'em, and there have been some interesting things happening in the entertainment industry. There's some interesting things happening in Salt Lake, and I am definitely more of a fan, at least in this part of the year, to just chillax and watch some films and then plan for the absolute utter chaos that the spring and the summer will inevitably bring about. But yeah, well, I'm glad to hear you're doing okay. I haven't asked you that question in a minute, so I just want to make sure that we're good to go, because this movie is interesting to say the to say the very least. From the IMDb synopsis, set on a remote island off the west coast of Ireland, the Banshees of Inisherin follows lifelong friends Padraig and Colm, who find themselves in an impasse when Colm unexpectedly puts an end to their friendship. A stunned Padraig, aided by his sister Siobhan, and troubled young Islander Dominic, endeavors to repair the relationship, refusing to take no for an answer. But Padraig's repeated efforts only strengthen his former friend's resolve, and when Colm delivers a desperate ultimatum, events swiftly escalate with shocking consequences. This movie was written and directed, like I mentioned before, by Martin McDonagh. McDonagh has done some powerful titles in the past. He is known for the aforementioned In Bruges, The Seven Psychopaths, The Banshees of Inisherin, but also, and this was unknown to me before we started going through this film, he also wrote 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, which was another Oscar contender back in 2017. And just the repertoire that he has so far in regards to just those 4 titles, including a lot of the other things that he's been able to do when it comes to this weird kind of, how can I put this? He has the capability of being able to provide action, drama, comedy, and some of these titles really come out in that regard. And I was really happy to see that we really leaned really hardcore into some McDonagh writing that whose characters are really put forth brilliantly by Collin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, who first got into what we mentioned before, into this duo of acting powerhouse ness with In Bruges, and was able to come out with another Oscar contender with this one here in Banshees of Inisherin. Of course, it goes without saying, but we're going to say it anyway. If you guys haven't seen The Banshees of Inisherin, stop listening, because we're going to absolutely spoil everything.
Spoiler alerts! Spoiler alerts!
We're going to talk about that scene with the donkey. We're going to talk about that scene with the scissors. We're going to talk about that scene with the violin. And it's all going to be ruined for you if you haven't already seen the movie. So be careful before treading forward. We're going to ruin it appropriately. That being said, Andrus, when we're dealing with like movies like this, this is an interesting take on a historical drama, historical comedy, because we do know that takes place in Ireland, but only through small points in the story. Specifically, when we see some of the characters looking from the shore and looking at the bombs and explosions going off in the mainland of Ireland, we come to understand that this story takes place during the 1920s. More importantly, probably around 1922, 23, 24, during the end or possibly the middle of the Irish Revolution. And for those of you, we're not a history podcast, but this we have to go into it a little bit because this movie centers around that time frame, roughly around 1923, when Ireland, after declaring its independence from the British Kingdom, they were able to have Ireland remain its own separate state. But the fighting didn't stop there. After the work from, I believe it was Michael Collins, who historically was characterized by Liam Neeson in a movie back in like 2008 or something, I think it was. The Civil War came out between the IRA and the party that wanted to still remain under the British kingdom, but still maintaining some independence. The Civil War ended, and things are as they are. And this is a historical podcast, so if I'm getting some of this wrong, then I apologize. I just looked on Wikipedia for a brief moment before we got to this
maybe
movie.
some of our listeners who are history buffs can help educate us.
Please correct me. Please correct me with huge amounts of exclamation points in the comments. I am begging you. But ultimately, interesting thing, the two leading political parties in Ireland are direct descendants of what was once two sides over a long and bitter civil war. But this is when the movie takes place, and I can't help but see that when we're looking at the two characters played by Farrell and Gleeson, that it's an allegory for this time period. I think it's an allegory for the Irish Civil War, where we have two people that probably grew up together, were friends for their entire lives, and then something happens, something dramatic, and then they become enemies. The first act starts with right to the point with Collin Farrell's character going about and coming by to Gleeson's character's Colm Doherty's house and asking if he wants to go to the pub, which is apparently a daily thing. You do your work on the farm, then you go and grab a couple pints, and life is good. And for some reason, Doherty just does not feel like going. He completely ghosts, for lack of a better term, Pedrick, and that's when things begin to roll, and we begin to go into like this soft set dramatic comedy. In my opinion, it was akin to a tragedy, because I don't know, some of these things kind of hit home, and I want to talk with you, Andrus, in regards to what were your initial feelings when you were getting into this movie, because there are funny parts to it, but I can't help but think of like poor Pedrick, who is classified and wonderfully played by Collin Farrell as being a bit of a dullard. He apparently can talk people's ears off about what he finds in his donkey's dung for 2 hours straight or something like that. And he's well known as being a nice guy, but not an exciting one. And then we have Colm Doherty, who is a little older, and he is having an existential crisis trying to compose a piece of music that will, enshrine his home of Inisherin and to hopefully allow him to be remembered for hundreds of years as an Irish Beethoven. What were your feelings going into this? Because we talked a little bit before we were recording, and this movie depressed the living hell out of me. But you talked to me and said that you were laughing the entire way through, and I can understand as to why. But what were your initial prospects when we were going into the first act? The story being set up, and these beautiful cinematics of Ireland going back and forth. What were your initial feelings?
Well, here's another movie where I had zero input into my watching
Awesome.
of it.
Yeah.
So I came in completely blind, and like within the first 5 minutes, I was giggling
Really?
like an idiot. And that continued through the rest of the story. I mean, I found it definitely hit my dark funny bone.
Yeah, it's definitely a dark comedy, if anything.
Yeah, it's a dark comedy for sure. Like the genres that it says on IMDb is comedy and drama. And I definitely get that.
Yeah.
I found it to be incredibly funny. And I think the humor for me comes in the performance of the actors, also the writing. If you paid attention to the writing, it was hysterical. The redundancies in the back and forth, and even the characters were pretty funny as well.
I think we go about, we find a setup here where we have this back and forth coming about. It is really leaning into the small town kind of hierarchy. Everybody knows each other. Everybody knows who married who. We have, the town gossip, who also happens to be the male mistress or whatever at the local store. We have people who are coming in from different parts of the islands, and everybody seems to know exactly what everyone else is doing in their business, because there can't be more than 50 people populating this place or something along those lines. What I did find really funny was exactly what you're talking about. We have this mainstay in the pub. That is has your friendly barkeep played by Pat Short, John Joe Devine, and we have the capability of being able to see that there's like the center of this town square where people come about, and because it did a really good way of very well a way of portraying what social interactions were like in the 1920s in Ireland, I imagine. You talk about your family, you talk about your work, then you talk about maybe one extra thing, and that's about it on rotation. But one thing that I found refreshing about John Joe's place was that this was a place where people came to cavort and drink, but also this is where Colm Doherty's troupe of violin players came by to try out his compositions and that kind of thing. We come about and we see that other characters are, provided some space to add into the comedy, especially when it comes to the ridiculously talented Kerry Condon, who has a career spanning movies and television in England, Ireland, and the States that is ridiculously heavy set and just studded with incredible accomplishments. I am a big fan of Barry Keoghan. I pray to whatever gods may exist that I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but he did honestly best supporting actor caliber of acting with his Dominic Kearney, a young, shy, not all there, young Irishman who unfortunately is getting the living crap kicked out of him by his
which is so tragic.
So tragic, but they play it off. His character plays it off as it being, I don't know how I was able to find humor in domestic abuse, but the writing here, we're coming back and forth, and like people are doing this really wonderful thing that McDonagh has mastered, is that he is so blunt through his characterizations of people that it just makes sense. I'm taken back to a scene in another one of his movies I mentioned before, in Bruges, where Collin Farrell's character, out of the goodness of his heart, is telling a gentleman who is, for lack of a better term, not in shape, telling him because he cares about strangers, not to like walk up this tourist tower, which is like it's kind of like walking up the Empire State Building in New York or something. He goes out of his way to warn this person, "Oh, you're gonna be walking up there a while. You shouldn't do it." And then when the character asks why, and he says, "Well, because you're fat, and you're probably gonna die." I'm paraphrasing. That isn't the way. Of course, my memory is not going to give McDonagh's prose justice, but that's what this movie is. It's about this absurd switch up from the norm, and people being just blunt and just uncharacteristically, unromantically true to it, and that's where I find charm in the movie coming about. When it was first pushed as a suggestion, because we wanted to start, going through some Oscar titles and that kind of thing. What do you think was bringing your interest in this movie, Andrus? Was it, for me, it was mostly curiosity. I know that when we have the duo here with Farrell and Gleeson,
Right.
where we're going to probably get something that was ridiculously entertaining, and both Gleeson and Farrell work so well because they have the capability of being able to say so much without using the words and the dialogue, which I have always loved about both these actors. But this isn't in Bruges. This is something completely different, even though it's written by the same team, I think. So what kind of attracted you to this, and how were you pleasantly surprised as we're going through the first act and realizing that out of nowhere, Colm Doherty doesn't want to be Patrick's friend anymore. He wants to end a friendship that's been on for decades, maybe, And when we find out why, it's for the simplest of reasons. It's just, I don't like you anymore.
Well, and that was the draw.
Yeah.
Is I think the appeal for me is we're immediately put into this conflict that we have no information on, and we're in discovery mode the entire time.
Yeah, 100%. Wait until like even
until
like
we realized there really truly was no catalyst for this.
No.
It was literally just a mind shift.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the situation too where it is these extraordinary things happen from like a ridiculously normal circumstance, which is one thing that I love about these films that McDonagh has his hand in. We go about, and the first act introduces, the problem that's coming about. The second act introduces the point of, Pedro trying to figure out why. And ultimately, the climax of the second act is when Colm Doherty says, I just don't like you. I'm an artist. I can't waste my time talking to you because you talk about BS and it bothers me. And I've had enough. I have to. He wants to write this song so that he'll be remembered because he's going through an existential crisis. He's terrified of his own death, that kind of thing. And then he gives an ultimatum. He says, Pedrick, and he's a violinist too. Colm Doherty is a violinist composer who's like making songs and ditties and Irish jigs and that kind of thing. And he says, if you keep talking to me one more word, I will start cutting off my fingers. Please don't make me do that. And I just feel so much for Collin Farrell's character throughout this entire thing. When I know that these extremes pop up as being like, oh, that's ridiculous, that's hilarious. It's kind of like almost like a I don't know, that I don't want to make a direct comparison to Guy Ritchie or anything because his films are completely different. But when it comes to the way in which this writing pops up, it almost breaks the calm so abruptly with these ridiculously dramatic ultimatums. If you keep talking to me, I'm going to cut off my fingers. I mean, that adds some humor to it. What were you thinking when we were going into the second act and we're beginning to find out Colm Doherty's reasons why, and then also the dramatic, and he goes through with it, the dramatic ultimatums that he's taking just to get some peace and quiet so that he can compose his art. What are your feelings in regards to that?
I don't know because it's definitely. The story is told through Patrick's perspective.
Yeah.
I think, and there's something about who he is and what he does that makes him so sympathetic.
Yes, absolutely.
That I didn't find him to be incredibly annoying.
No, me neither.
To be incredibly anything other than just maybe a shell of a human being that used to, maybe have a little bit more zest for life and stuff like that. But in his simplicity and his honesty and his performance, I felt like Patrick's just the kind of guy that does his own thing and he's content doing his own thing.
Yeah.
And really nothing changed for him except for how people treated him. And that's where things shifted. So
yeah.
I didn't really have any major sympathy for Colm because he's treating the sympathetic character.
Yeah.
Shit.
I had a huge 180 when I have nothing but the utmost sympathy for Colin Farrell's character, and I did not like Colm Doherty.
I think that's the reason behind it, right? Is there's so many dynamic players in this story that I even found myself wondering if Patrick was a little bit on the simple side of things as well. I'm not sure if he had a brain injury or if he's just not very educated, and the simple life is the simple life.
It is.
So
he's a farmer. They're both
bother
farmers.
Exploring that, right? But with Barry's character coming in, you definitely realize that Dominic is the one that's not so smart in this scenario, which by comparison made Patrick even that more effective in me responding to his story. I mean, he was depressed as hell.
Yeah, they all were. They all
So
were.
I mean, there's that, and the tailspin with that cutoff,
Yeah.
the friendship,
Yeah.
is definitely something that is tangible and visceral
Absolutely.
and kinetic as far as what happened through the movie. So I thought that it was done beautifully. But
We mentioned a bit like how both of these actors were able to really steal the scene with just sitting in a chair and just having a particular look on their face. And the way that Collin Farrell looked when Pedrick realized that their friendship might be over, or he's just wondering if what he did wrong, or he's wondering this and that. I got so sad for him, and I just got more angry at Doherty. Doherty ends up being just this. He isn't violent, except to himself. He isn't violent in regards to what he wants to have in his life. He's just asking people to do. Yeah, exactly. He's walking around with 5 stumps for fingers by the end of the movie. But this guy is he's such an asshole. He has such a narcissistic, egotistical, ridiculous. You have to do what I want you to because I can't stand you anymore. And if anybody is giving him applause for being honest or something, which truly is a McDonagh trait in his characters, especially his main ones, then I think you're missing it. I really do. I don't appreciate the fact that Doherty thinks that he's so important, or that his life's so important, that he has the capability of being able to cut off and ghost Pedrick so cruelly. And that really gets hit home, like in the first act, where you see like Collin Farrell just sitting there with a cigarette, sad and kind of broken and wondering what's going on. And I mentioned like how there's an allegory when it comes to the Irish Civil War. I honestly also think, because I was feeling for these characters so much, I didn't see this as a comedy. I saw some comedic elements, but I didn't see it as a comedy. I see this as more like an allegory for just loneliness. And, don't mean to like peddle too much stuff in real life and everything, but loneliness that we found through, statistical studies. It's 2023. We know what's going on with some of this stuff. Loneliness is killer. It's absolute killer. And we know that it can be at times as bad as, smoking cigarettes and that kind of thing. You guys can check this out on Google and everything. There have been studies that pop up with this kind of stuff. Did you feel the loneliness that was permeating here through the comedic environs, or was it a situation where like some of these things were popping up and it's like, oh, that's interesting.
No,
that's weird.
No, it wasn't subtle. It was there was an overture to it for sure. So
I felt so sorry for him. I really did. I kind of felt Collin Farrell's performance in this movie more so than I have in others.
Well, I would say there isn't one character in the entire show that wasn't exhibiting loneliness as part of who they were.
That's embodied a lot through Siobhan.
I don't think that there was one character in there. Like the desperation of the postal worker. She was. No, tell me. You never told me anything.
Yeah,
Why
exactly.
don't you tell me anything?
Please,
right?
I just want some sort of connection, some sort of human connection, please.
The poor fiddle player that ended up being Patrick's,
Yeah. You're speaking of Aaron Monaghan's character, Declan, who did such a great.
It was just awful.
It was awful.
So
but like
awful.
the whole line with the bread truck, where we find out that his father was killed by a bread truck,
and it was hysterical. It was hysterical. The way. That was a great setup.
That was a great setup, and you see
if it's that same bread truck
kill him. Then you see like the guilt on Collin Farrell's face when he's like, "Oh, but I had to do it." And like obviously we see a lot of the personification of loneliness through Siobhan. Kerry Condon. Oh my God, man. She is one of these jewels that I didn't realize I was a fan of until I did the IMDb search when we were researching this film. I mean, the credits this actor has just blow me out of the water. She is absolutely phenomenal. And we do have like something that pops up in a lot of these titles that we're going about, especially when it comes to Oscar contenders. We're looking at like 4 generations of Oscar capable actors here, all in one film. And this isn't the first time that Condon has been working with McDonagh, but the nods for awards and just the proper gravitas for the hard work that Gleeson, Farrell, Condon, and Keegan have done so far, and we have a century's worth of acting, if not more, and various generations of acting that are popping up in this whole thing, which really is just an establishment of talent that I found really refreshing. Because this movie, you're absolutely right. The movie is not pushed by action. There's beautiful cinematography, but of course, whenever you're off the shores of Ireland during the spring or whatever it was, this is going to be knocking your socks off.
No, stunning imagery.
Yeah,
stunning.
But it's like you mentioned before. It's the editing, and also it is the dialogue of everybody coming together and pushing back and forth and carrying the weight where they have to.
Yeah, and did you see how many Oscar nominations this has currently?
Currently, no. I know it got one for Best Picture, but I'm not sure if there are others. Was it like Best Screenplay, that kind of thing?
Every single actor that we've talked about.
Yeah.
So we've got Colin, we've got Brendan, Carrie, Barry.
Mm-hmm.
They've all been nominated. It's nominated for Best Editing. It's nominated for Best Picture, Best Director.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as far as this one being a true contender for the big awards, I think all of them have a really great shot based on performance and structure and everything that they did with this film.
So that puts up another question that I want to talk to you before, because we've done things on the podcast where we've talked about why is this movie nominated for an Oscar, you know? And we've had back when our good friend Umberto Estrada was still offering us a commentary, we would get in arguments as to why we think some movies are Oscar contenders and why some movies aren't. I agree with you where I'm not surprised that this one got put on the sheets. But why is it, do you think? Because we're not dealing with I don't mean to play an old joke or anything like that, but we're not dealing with anything that has to do with World War II. We're not dealing with anything that has to do with heavy historical drama, even though this does take place in the past. We don't have anything that happens to do with huge romance or political intrigue or anything along those lines. Why is this movie an Oscar contender?
Because it's true filmmaking and true storytelling in a really excellent, high quality way.
Could you talk about that a bit? In your experience, what does it mean? And this is a big question, but when we get to scenes and when we get to films like this, I always want to pick your brain about it because I know it's a constantly moving thing. Something that is a good point of repertoire for proper writing in 2019 or something is not going to be the same as now because people's needs change, Oscar contentions change. How did this movie, do you think, through its writing, provide a stable reason to make it Oscar worthy for 2022?
Quality is really kind of the best answer that I can give for it.
Yeah.
Pardon me. I think that I think based on the contenders that we have here, I haven't seen a lot of this year's Oscar contenders.
Yeah, me neither.
I'll just read you the list really quick.
Yeah.
All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar: Way of the Water, Elvis.
Yeah.
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
That's interesting.
Banshees of Inisherin, The Fablemans, Maverick, Top Gun, Triangle of Sadness, which I've not heard of, Tar, which I've not heard of, and Women Talking. So out of all of those, I've seen Elvis, I've seen Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Well, it kind of stands in Bert's brought this up in the past,
and Top Gun. So based on those contenders, I would agree that all of those are contenders. All of those were done expertly and in the highest possible quality that they can make them.
Yeah.
But this one it's definitely about the characters and about the timeline and about relationships and everything.
Absolutely.
And it's just, there's no real flash to it. There's it's not special effects heavy. It's not there's no real big mixing issues any which way.
Yeah.
It's just honest storytelling, and I really appreciate that.
Honest storytelling, I think, really nails it. And that's one thing too, we were mentioning it before, I was mentioning it before, how McDonagh has a very, very good way of getting you on the side of blunt characters who are not afraid to, pull away from the truth. By the time we get into the second act, the truth does come out, and we find out specifically, like I mentioned before, Colm Doherty is dealing with an existential crisis. On more than one occasion, he will be talking to David Pierce, which played the priest, in confession, and the priest will always ask him, in regards to, which is also some comedic dialogue, because he says things like, well, why don't you just make up with him, or something like that. And the priest also asks at the end of every confession, how's the dismay, how's the depression, how's the whatever. And at the beginning of the movie, Calm Dirty is fine because he thinks he has a purpose, and that purpose is to compose the greatest jig or become the Irish Beethoven, and he thinks that he can do it. By the end of the movie, he says that it's come back, and that's because by the second act, after we're given provided information in regards to as to why Calm Doherty wants Pedrick out of his life, he's already dismembered himself. He's already cut off a finger because Pedrick can't understand why his best friend suddenly doesn't like him. And there's just this way that I think Brendan Gleeson is a very intimidating individual. His acting has spanned over the cuddly character in fantasy all the way to like the murderer in the alley who works for the mob. And you believe Brendan Gleeson when he makes a threat. You absolutely do. He takes on this quiet cruelty in this movie that honestly just made me so sad, because you could tell that it is such a great way to push this simple, empathetic, really just unknowing Collin Farrell over the edge. And by the time we get to the second act, and we realize, by the time we get to the third act, actually, and we've been given all the information in regards to why Calm Doherty is doing what he does, which is just I also got angry at Doherty too, because like it's got a little close to home, and it's just a situation where that's just a crappy thing to do to somebody. If you want to break friendship with somebody, that's fine, but at the very least, talk to them about it and do what they have to. And every time that Calm Doherty did give Pedrick any insight as to why, it was forced out of him, almost at gunpoint, because Pedrick loved his friend, and because he's pulling his hair out trying to think of what could it do, what could it be, please, I just want everything to go back together, I'll do whatever I have to just this cold, threatening Brendan Gleeson, who, to his credit, did this character masterfully. There are a couple times when like you do see the real violence of Calm Doherty, where he actually punches out a cop who is threatening Pedrick with his bare hands. And Brendan Gleeson is a big guy. But I think the things that really, really kind of got me were the bar scenes where Brendan Gleeson delivers these ultimatums the same way that a bad guy would deliver a hostage negotiation in like Mission Impossible 3. If you talk to me one more time, I'm going to cut off my fingers. And it's like this weird kind of passive-aggressive situation too, because he isn't openly hurting Pedrick. He's making his own safety the point of the ultimatum. He's holding himself hostage. Pedrick doesn't understand, and he wants to find out what's really going on, and he's worried about his friend being depressed. And it ends up with Calm Doherty being, to his credit, a man of his word, and he cuts off all of his fingers on his left hand, mutilating himself, and no longer being able to play the violin, just to prove a point. But by that time, it's too late. We find out at the third act, to be honorable to his promise to Pedrick, Pedrick talks to Calm too much, and Calm is quote-unquote forced to cut off all the fingers on his hands, and he brings them to Pedrick's house and throws them at the door as a way of imbibing guilt. That really ticked me off, because it was like a situation where Calm was saying, you did this to me, here's a reminder. And it's not Pedrick's fault that he wants to find out why his friend doesn't like him anymore. It's not Pedrick's fault that he wants to find out why his friend doesn't love him anymore. But with this cold, cruel dignity, Brendan Gleeson comes up and he just throws his dismembered fingers at the door. We find out later during this time there's a switchover, which is what you mentioned earlier about how Collin Farrell's character goes from empathetic and somewhat of a dullard to an angry, vengeful ghost. And I'd really love to see what your thoughts were as we see this character shift towards the end of the second act going into the third, and what your opinions were of it. Do you think it was justified and properly played the way that Collin Farrell was taking on this character's new attitude? Because Pedrick became a different person by the end of this movie.
Well, I think everything shifted in his life, which is the perfect catalyst for that adjustment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, by that point, his sister left.
Mm-hmm. Siobhan finds a new job on the mainland, and she hates the island. Siobhan's kind of the hero of the situation because she's willing to take her life into her own hands despite the
Yeah.
pain she's causing others. And that's some things that adults have to do. She's classy enough to say that she's sorry and that she still loves her brother, Pedrick, and that, she even writes him a letter saying, you should come with me.
Yeah, she invites him.
Yeah.
But the loss of the friendship, the loss of his sister, the
Yeah, it's a
loss
death.
of his best friend Jenny, the donkey.
The donkey.
Horribly tragic way for the donkey.
Okay, so like this is where the comedy starts coming in. We find out at the beginning of the third act, Doherty throws his fingers at the door of Pedrick's house, and all throughout this time, Pedrick has a pet donkey named Jenny, and
and their relationship is so
adorable. It is so cute. Jenny asks to come into the kitchen, and then we have like these scenes where Collin Farrell just says, "Oh yeah, come on," and this donkey comes in happy and like hoofs around and like sleeps next to him at the fire and that kind of thing. Then we find out later, though, that Jenny apparently has a taste for human flesh, and
don't say it that way.
and she scooped up the fingers by Colm Doherty, unbeknownst to Colm. Colm didn't go out to try and murder his former best friend's pet, but Jenny tries to eat the fingers, thinking they're a carrot or something. I don't know.
Sure.
And she chokes on them and dies. And we find this heartbreaking scene, which this scene did make me tear up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we have like the still shot of just a solid minute on Colin Farrell's face. And
it's also the discovery and the blood trail of the fingers leading to the body of a, fallen best friend.
Yeah. And that is like a characterization of how Pedrick and Colm's relationship truly dies. It dies with Jenny. And I can't help but think of like when we have that shot on Colin Farrell's face where he's looking down and you don't see the body of the donkey, and you see Colin Farrell has been through some stuff. He has dealt with addiction. He has dealt with violence. He has dealt with all these kind of things. And I'm so happy that he's been able to turn his career around in the past 2 decades to come about and show us the immense amount of talent that he has. We have this solid shot on Colin Farrell, and we see his emotions go from slightly calm and upset to devastated as he figures out that his best friend, his pet, was killed because she swallowed the fingers of his former best friend and choked on them. And I will admit, I mentioned that I laughed. This movie does do a little bit of a 180 effect, a little bit of a whiplash effect, because the next scene that you see, it's actually kind of sweet, but the next scene you see is Colin Farrell sitting there in his home, and he's petting the head of his dead pet donkey. I don't know for the life of me why that made me giggle, but because it's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's absurd,
and it's also tragic and terrible, and all of the things that it is as well.
But one thing too that we do that that McDonagh was able to push forth with this is the appreciation for giving actors enough room. Because when we see after the death of Jenny, which is symbolic of the death of their friendship, the next scene we see after the mourning period, which lasts a couple scenes, we see now this different Pedrick, and Colin Farrell is putting on full smolder. His eyebrows are at attention, and we have this situation where we see him looking in the mirror and realizing that it's just anger now, and he's going to be a gentleman about it. But he's not going to let this stand. And he punches his mirror out of anger, in a sense, breaking the spectrum and totally like falling into this new evil persona, this vengeful persona that he has. And then he goes back to the bar and he offers an ultimatum to the now completely dismembered, mutilated, poor, calm Doherty. And he says, I'll wait until Sunday, God's Day, and at 2 p.m., which was a constant thing in the film. They would meet at 2 p.m. every day, and they would go to the bar and talk about their day. But he says, at 2 p.m., I'm going to take your dog out of your house. I wouldn't do anything to hurt your poor dog, but I'm going to burn your house down. And there's not I just love the way they use the F word in this movie because it's so Irish. But he says he's going to burn his house down, and he offers an ultimatum. And you just see this presence now where this pain has been brought to Pedrick. And there is, what's the saying? there's an old saying that actually might be Irish. I'm not sure, that I was taught a long
It's
time.
an old Irish saying.
An old Irish saying that says there are two things that old men fear: a moonless night at sea during a storm, and the temper of a gentle man. And this is definitely a situation where we see Collin Farrell lean into some of the characters that he's played before. This man is famous for playing action-adventure villains. He's famous for playing dark people. He's famous for playing, people who are like balls to the wall and that kind of thing. And it was so refreshing to see him play the bad version of Pedrick, where Pedrick's not going to, do Miami Vice and jump into a drug dealer's lair or anything, but he sure as hell is going to burn down his former best friend's now nemesis's nemesis burn down their house without any guilt. It's all justified. There's no feeling. When we are dealing with like the different allegories that we have in this movie, when we are thinking about, this is definitely a story that could be placed as, these two characters are the different sides politically of Ireland, and how these friendships, these brotherhoods were torn apart during that trying time, during the Troubles. And we also see just this ongoing struggle for these characters to find themselves, to find a quality of life, to try and break free from the island. We see loneliness being pushed through. How does it adjust when we get to the finale of the third act, when we see that Dominic Kearney has committed suicide, when we see that Colm Doherty's house burns down to the ground, but Colm Doherty's actually okay because he had a second thought. He's like, I'm just going to get out of here and live on. Because there's that scene where Pedrick looks at him in the house while the house is burning down, and he just looks at him and just shakes his head, and then he just walks off with no remorse whatsoever. How does that affect you as a viewer when there are so many of these other themes happening all at once? There's a psychological part. There's this anti-war part. There's this familial part. I mean, how is it all mixing together for you when you're looking at this thing? Because it blew me away. That's one reason why it depressed me. This is a whole movie. This is dedicated to the idea of how loneliness is a killer. It's a killer of relationships. It's a killer of the personification of being. What are your feelings in that regard when you're seeing all these things get thrown back and forth?
Honestly, it's the slow burn to the boil to the top blowing off, because it all made sense to me. It did all make
sense. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, as far as foreshadowing goes, like, it all made sense. I wasn't caught off guard by any of it, other than the reveal that Colm did flee his burning house after being inside of it. But there was no real surprise there. I mean, the most shocking thing for me was the discovery of the donkey Jenny.
I feel you.
But everything else made a lot of sense. Like, even Colm's threats that could have been empty were not. And I wasn't surprised when he flung the first finger at the door.
I respect it. I respect that he was like a man of his word. I don't like this character for being such a narcissist that he's not going to explain to his friend or try it. I mean, you see, that's one thing that kind of just carried throughout the entire movie. I was rooting for Pedrick. To either change as a person because he could still hang out with the friend that he loves so much. And I'll tell you one thing, when Pedrick decided that we're not friends anymore and now my wrath is going to come out, I celebrated that. I was very happy to see Pedrick stand up for himself in a way that was outwardly violent when compared to Doherty's inwardly violent point. And I do have to give it to Brendan Gleeson too, because by the midpoint of the third act, when Doherty realizes that he's gone too far, when he realizes how cruel he really has been to his best friend, and when he realizes that it's too late to make amends, Gleeson does these looks that he just displays offside of camera that just makes me really, really impressed with him understanding that, he's in the thick of it now, but he still has to remain honorable to his to his laws of life, I guess. We then culminate at the end of the movie, where we see Colm Doherty standing on the beach, and then Pedrick pops up, as they usually do. They had apparently plenty of conversations on the shores They do live on an island, and there's plenty of houses that are, right up against the shoreline. And they come about, and they have just this ridiculously beautiful scene, I think, when it comes to like the final conversation. They're looking across towards the mainland. They mention, Colm Doherty says that, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Colm Doherty says that the fighters haven't fought in a long time.
It seems like it's over.
It seems like it's over. And then Pedrick replies, well, it'll probably start up again, and then Collin Farrell just like looks at Doherty. Pedrick just looks at Doherty, and the line that he drops is, some things are too far gone to be forgiven. I think it might be better that way. And I loved that scene because I think that where Doherty, if there's one thing that I can say that might be a bit of a critique in regards to this film, and again, I'm not, an Oscar award winning writer or anything like that. I'm just, a guy at the podcast who's done some independent films and knows what it's like to work hard. If there's one critique that I could give, I wanted to be on Doherty's side from time to time, but it never gave me a reason to. All we have, and it's good exposition, but we have exposition in one scene where Doherty is complaining to Pedrick that, he just is dull and that he doesn't want to talk to him anymore because he doesn't want to waste any more time. He doesn't want to waste any more time talking to Pedrick. He wants to spend his time making his music. And that's fine, but you don't do that to another person that you've, who's been your best friend for decades and everything. And there's like some personal ramifications in regards to that. What I would have wanted was, maybe a couple scenes where we do actually see Pedrick being an absolute dullard and really just monotonously torturing Doherty and not even knowing it with his conversation. That would have given me a little more justification in regards to the extravagant lengths that Doherty went to try and get away from his former best friend. And we didn't get that. And the last scene when we see Pedrick putting the last nail in the coffin, when he says those statements, it really speaks true to him saying, this is who we are now, this is who I am now, and this is the way it's going to stay, and it's your fault. And it is. It absolutely is. And I found that to be really refreshing, and Colin Farrell's delivery of that was great, and I'm glad it happened at the ending. Do you think that, it's easy to take sides in this movie? Because you mentioned that it was funny for you throughout, and that's because of like the extravagant things that happened here, these exclamation points that pop up. Do you think it's easy to take sides, or do you think that they purposefully made this like a situation where you don't know who to root for, or even if you should root for anybody here besides Siobhan, who's getting her life together and getting off the island?
I don't know. I was mostly connected to Patrick.
Yeah.
But there's also two sides to every story, three sides to every
Yeah, that's true.
Whatever. So as far as a connection to characters, I can definitely connect to all of them.
Okay.
But I had the most sympathy for Patrick.
Yeah.
Colm I appreciated his commitment.
Yeah.
And his consistency for who he was.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite lines in there they repeat, and it was so funny, which is, maybe I do like him now. Yeah. He finally, the nice speech was one of my favorite moments. Is when he's talking about how Patrick's confronting Colm, and he's talking about how he's nice, and why can't he just accept that he's nice?
Yeah.
The only people that really see him for him being nice and not this pathetically sad person is his family.
Yeah.
And he lists his mom and his dad and his sister, and he's like, why can't you?
Yeah.
And he leaves, and of course this is a whiskey induced rant.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even remember
it. Yeah. Yeah.
And then Gleeson's character says, well, shoot, now maybe I think I like him again.
Yeah.
And then they repeat it again. And it's just funny to me because that back and forth makes a lot of sense in just...
They're so isolated.
In the storytelling of what this story is.
It just makes... It's great that you bring that up. This definitely made sense. I mean, I can understand. The thing is that I have like this emotional reaction to Doherty and Pedro doing these things, but I didn't have a question as to why. There wasn't any cardinal sin in this movie. Everything made sense. It was a situation where you and I never had to say to ourselves, well, why is this happening? Okay, well, let me fill it in my head so I can justify this and keep watching it and remain interested. Okay, so maybe this happened and blah, blah, blah. And we've talked about that before, where if you're in a movie and you have to make up your own headcanon to like justify certain choices that are made, then the writing's bad, period. Right. Which can be very challenging, and it depends upon the genre, but something like this that is leading so heavily on incredible dialogue, editorialism, and the characterizations that are provided by the actors, that's all you have. You mentioned it before. No special effects. Well, there were some big explosions, but not a lot of big explosions. This is carried on the shoulders of people who know how to deal with dialogue, timing, and expression, and have a great script to do it. And honestly, I really do think it is this surreal masterclass in subtlety. And I think that if you're an actor, again, I'm not an actor, but if you're an actor and if you want to take a look at how people can pronounce so much with one line and just a look on their face, this is a movie to keep an eye on. Just the different angles that were put forth on these 1v1s, these portrait shots that are popping up that give enough air in the room so that Farrell and Gleeson can show you, not just tell you what their characters are feeling, is definitely a stroke in the plus column for me.
Even the interior / exterior shots,
absolutely,
where we see from the inside of the house what's happening outside too. I mean, some of those were just so beautifully put together and composed. It was really well done.
Yeah. Let's stay on that subject a bit because we're getting close to the end of the episode here, and let's still go into specialities a bit. Primarily, I was really interested to see what you would think about when we go through the usual gamut of questions in this regard. Is this a different movie with different actors? I don't think this movie could be made in this way without this team. I'm wondering if you agree in that regard.
Well, just because it kind of is a perfect storm of who they put together and the roles that they have for the story that it is. I wouldn't adjust anything because I'm calling this a pretty perfect composition as far as talent and story.
Man, all right.
And what was put together. It really did. The more I think about it, the more I agree that it's a really great film.
Awesome.
So.
What do you think were I always want to pick your brain about this a little bit too, because when you're dealing with local shoots like this in a isolated part of Ireland, its own challenges have to arise on the day. There are some things going on online where, in regards to how I believe some of the crew got lost and they had to depend upon the locals of the island to give them the directions, and they never got to set because they couldn't find it.
So they're lost forever somewhere.
Yeah. But what are some of the what are some of the production challenges that you think were probably popping up with something like this?
For me, it seemed so simple.
Yeah.
That I can't imagine that other than weather being a factor or the coastline being a factor, I really don't see this having very many issues at all. It just, working with animals that have to be as well trained as the animals.
I never thought about that. Yeah, but there were some big horses in this.
Man, the dog was terrific.
Yeah.
And as was
the donkey,
the horse, the donkey, and the cows.
Yeah,
all of them. It felt like they all had personalities, which I think is a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, rest in peace, Jenny, for sure.
Well, yeah. So, I'm not putting the doggy outside when I'm sad. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. What a great line! It's a beautiful line.
There's some really, really wonderful things about what they did.
Yeah.
And if they ran into problems, I think that they hit it really well because it didn't seem like they ran into any issues.
How important or how much of a benefit do you think it is? Honestly, the talent is out of the park with this lineup. But to the point that I made earlier, in your opinion, how much of a benefit is it to have actors that cross generations like this? We have, Barry Keoghan is not, brand spanking new, but most people don't know him from anything except for like the Elementals. And he has beginnings of an amazing repertoire, and his work here as Dominic is outstanding.
Well, and there's a connection that I have with him that I
Interesting.
didn't realize. American Animals was at the Sundance Labs, and I worked on that film with the director
Brilliant.
at the labs. And now that I remember that I can't remember if he himself was actually at the labs,
Mhm.
or if I just saw him in the film itself. But a good portion of the cast did come to the labs.
We talk about the labs from time to time too. It's a point in the Sundance Film Festival where film creators come together, actors, directors, production designers, that kind of thing, and they all work together in like this brain trust to try and
workshopping scenes that are difficult. Yeah,
it's like this way of being able to work their muscles before they actually get the chance to shoot them for real, and it can be very beneficial to a lot of filmmakers.
Yeah, but Eternals is definitely the one that I think put him on the map.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with my brother the other day about Chernobyl. I haven't seen it, but he did, and he said that it was terrific.
Yeah.
So he's been around for some time. He's young, he's new, but he's not fresh off the boat.
Right, but that's the thing that I mean, though. We have like this cross generational thing because we have Barry, who's coming in as like a young actor. Kerry Condon and Collin Farrell are kind of like the same generation, and Brendan Gleeson is a legend,
icon.
Yeah, absolutely. How much of a benefit is that to a film, do you think, when you have like this over a century's worth of talent coming about and bringing up these characters and kind of cross-pollinating? I imagine it must happen in the labs a lot.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you have creative advisors that have been doing this for the majority of their lifetime, and then you have these fresh, brand new. One director was early 20s.
Wow,
that's
interesting.
So I mean, it really has a large scope of age and experience and perspective and all of those things. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. I mean, Robert Redford, you just say his name and it just has so much respect to it. But he's been making movies the majority of his life.
Yeah, that kind of experience cannot be denied.
So when you have that kind of idea as far as creative advising and knowledge and wealth of knowledge and expertise, you put that into this film.
Yeah.
I mean, how long has Martin McDonagh been doing his filmmaking?
Oh, decades. Yeah.
And Brendan Gleeson was in his first short film that he has credited.
That's right.
So I mean, just the
work with the people you know.
The collaboration is really important, and I think the idea of family and keeping because he's worked with Collin several times as well.
Right.
Keeping things in a small tight family makes it a lot easier because then there's a shorthand. There's a different language that you can speak and make sure that you get everything done.
It's important to keep in consideration how, when you're making a film about the death and the plight of relationships, that you happen to have good relationships with your actors and your production team. 100%.
Right.
I think that the sound here was very onto the specialties, back to it. The sound here was ridiculously competent. What I really did enjoy is that I didn't realize this before. I'm a fan of Irish music. I think it was great that we got some some new jigs and everything popping up here. The on-site recording was spot on. I wasn't able to pick out any ADR or anything like that, and you'd be surprised how hard it is to get clean audio when you're recording the majority of your film outside in a windswept Irish island. But specifically, I'm going to read from the wiki real quick in regards to the music. The original score is composed by Carter Burwell, McDonagh's frequent collaborator. McDonagh did not want Burwell to compose a quote-unquote Irish-based score, despite the film's setting, which I found interesting. For Pedrick's character, Burwell approached a childlike and Disney character-based score, and also used fiddle-themed compositions specifically for Colm's character, probably to provide this elemental difference in regards to their characters. One being old and classical, the other being like a child, at least in the first and second act, and that's what Collin Farrell was able to provide with Pedro's character. So I think that like when we're going about here, after speaking with you, and yeah, go ahead.
I'll add into that
Yeah.
too. I think having an Irish ditty background to it might be a little bit too in your face. So I
Maybe,
think
yeah.
that's a really great choice for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can really appreciate the. I mean, again, it's a masterclass in subtlety, which is strange because McDonagh's characters are always so blunt, and the comedy is extravagant. It's these big flashes that pop up. Man, it's such a unicorn, and I think I'm going to be watching this movie from time to time just to try and figure out how some of this stuff was done and just appreciate that more. But speaking of appreciation, we've come to the end of the episode, and we definitely want to take a moment to say that we appreciate all of you listening. If you happen to like what we're saying, by all means let us know. If you happen to dislike what we're saying, let us know. Have you seen the Banshees of Inisherin? Have you been to Ireland? Do you happen to have the story of having an unfortunate falling out with their former best friend? Let us know. Go ahead and like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on SoundCloud. Email us at pullfocuspod@gmail.com. And feel free to let us know what you think. But just remember, we may be wrong, but it's your job to tell us. Andrus, as always, thank you very much again for, despite being exhausted, giving me a call and letting us talk about this film. I am excited about Oscar season because there are just these ridiculous points of whiplash in the selections, and I'm interested to see which one's going to hit. I really do agree with you though when you say that Banshees of Inisherin is a heavy contender, and after talking with you today, I realize that even more. So it's always appreciated. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you. That's fun.
You guys all take care. Well, we'll see you in the next one. In the meantime, be good to yourselves, and we'll see you later. Bye.